This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Lunnel and Charles Nystrand of Koppi Coffee Roasters. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Really appreciate you listening to the show. And if you haven't subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would encourage you to just hit subscribe wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Now, the Keys to the Shop podcast is brought to you in part by Keys to the Shop Consulting, working with new and experienced coffee professionals alike to help you start your coffee bar on the right foot or to help you refine and level up your existing operations. There's a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop can work with you remotely or in person to help you truly thrive in your coffee business. If you're interested in working directly with me to help your coffee business, then just email me and let's explore what working with Keys to the Shop looks like for your situation. The email is chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode of Founder Friday is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers. What makes them one of the best is that they not only bring in some of the best equipment in the world, but they also work with you to get the right equipment for your situation. And we know that purchasing equipment can be a pretty stressful thing. It's a lot of money, a lot of investment, and Prima knows this. This is why they're dedicated to your success, not only through the curating of great equipment and working with you in this way, but also on their website, you'll see there's a lot of resources to help you in your coffee brewing skills, your equipment maintenance skills and knowledge. And all this just goes to show that if you're looking for commercial coffee equipment for your business, having somebody like Prima Coffee in your corner is really critical. If you're a listener to Keys to the Shop, you can get 5% off your entire order right now by using the code KEYS5 at checkout when you go to prima-coffee.com/keys. That's the code KEYS5, the number 5, at checkout, and you get 5% off your entire order. It's a really generous offer from super generous people. So again, for all of your commercial coffee equipment needs, I recommend you use prima-coffee.com/keys. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series, the line of plant-based performance beverages that are the standard for plant-based beverages all over the world. One of the reasons why is because they do extensive testing for the performance of these beverages on actual coffee bars from actual baristas. So they're basically made for baristas and by baristas. And this gives you the peace of mind knowing that whatever you choose from their extensive lineup is going to stand up from the heat from the steaming process, give you amazing texture for latte art. And you know, so many of your customers order plant-based options, and we have to be dedicated to giving them the best. And for my money and in my experience, I'd say the best option for your cafe is the Pacific Barista Series. Go check them out, pacificfoodservice.com. I think you're really going to be pleased when you use the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today we have a great Founder Friday in store for you. We are going to be talking with the founders of Koppi Fine Coffee Roasters in Sweden, Lunnel and Charles Nystrand. Their company, Koppi, was founded in 2007, but before this business, they worked together at Robert Thorenson's two coffee bars called Mocha and Java over in Oslo, Norway. And even before that, Charles and Anne won the Swedish Barista Championships, and Anne herself made it to the finals in the World Barista Championships. They've both been involved in the Nordic Barista Cup for many years, and after 10 years of not competing, Anne decided to enter the Swedish Brewers Cup, which she won in 2016. The story of Koppi is a really interesting one because back when they first started, Charles was roasting, Anne was taking care of green buying and visiting wholesale clients and doing global coffee events. And they did this, including operating a cafe for 10 years. But then they decided to scale down and not up. They purposefully wanted to keep their business small, and the transition from that old model to a smaller model actually means that they've grown 60% in the last 3 years. So I'm really excited to share their story with you as they both talk about the evolution of their brand, their business, and what led them to these decisions to change their business the way they were. Certainly, if anybody was poised to expand exponentially into the market, it's these two. but their road less traveled, I think, is a pretty inspirational one. So it was really an honor to talk with them today. I hope that you get a lot out of this conversation. Really wonderful people with a fantastic story. So here now is my interview with the founders of Koppi, Anne Lunnel and Charles Nystrand. Well, Anne, Charles, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So glad to have you on. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely excited to have you. I've heard so many great things, and as I've been in the industry, for a while, and you have as well. I've, from afar followed different bits and pieces of news of Koppi and your careers and things like that. And so, how did your journey into coffee for both of you start? What kind of hooked you into the coffee industry, if you will?
Back in 2003, I think it was, I was studying in a town nearby called Malmö. That's just on the other side of the water from Copenhagen, actually. I was studying sound engineering. At that time, I would always go to a cafe, or actually an espresso bar, before I took the bus to the school. I saw they had a regional barista competition there, and I was working part-time at a cafe in Helsingborg at the time. And I thought okay, this is pretty cool. I want to try this out. And the following year I did not do that well, but I did it at least. And the year after that, 2005, I won the Swedish Championship.
Yeah, that was, I would say that was the start of everything, both for me as well. Charles won in 2005. And that year, the WBC was in Seattle, so we got to travel to the States. Obviously, that was a really great opportunity to network and meet other like-minded people.
Also, after the competition, I also got an offer to start working at a roastery and a coffee bar in Oslo, in Norway, which was pretty important because back then we didn't have anything like specialty coffee in Sweden at all, almost. I mean, specialty coffee back then was more or less based on how the coffee was brewed, and it was always espresso bars using Italian blends, I guess. So back then it was very different. I moved up to Oslo and came up a couple of months after. And then we ended up living there for a couple of years, working at what's now called Kaffa.
Yeah, I won the Swedish Championship the following year, 2006.
Okay, so you were in coffee also simultaneously. Both of you had been in the coffee business and got into competitions pretty much around the same time.
Charles's fault.
Yeah, it's my fault, I think.
Is it?
No, I was studying. I was studying at the time, so I was just doing a few hours a week at the same shop as Charles. I mean, we met way before then, so. Coffee is not what connected us. I kind of got interested as well after Charles won, so I decided to give it a go the following year, and it went well.
Obviously, I mean,
and that's year Klaus won WBC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really interesting start to a career. I mean, obviously, when you go back into WBC history and you look at people who've won or have, even won their national championships, there's a lot of opportunities that come from that, a lot of notoriety, but also there's this, you might, a lot of people also choose not to stay in coffee even after competitions, And so I guess I'm wondering, what is it that made you want to stick with coffee after? Was it the championships with the greater community that you were exposed to? I mean, what was that moment for you both where you thought, well, this is what we really want to do and pursue with our time and make it our profession?
I mean, I think it was just something, it wasn't like a conscious decision necessarily. I think it was just, we were just drawn into it because it was a lot of fun. We met so many great people. We also kind of started to experience what good or great coffee can be. So everything about it was kind of appealing to me, at least. During our time in Oslo, we kind of started talking about if we one day should open our own business. I didn't see myself staying in Oslo forever, at least. Yeah, and then one day, a good friend of ours called us and said that he was gonna leave his restaurant back in Helsingborg, where we come from, and he wanted us to take over the space. And we had to kind of make a decision pretty fast.
So what is it that made you decide to do it? Because you could have just continued to be baristas and work for other businesses instead of take on what inevitably is going to be a pretty big challenge. Exciting, but it's a big challenge. I mean, you just said, yeah, let's do it. Was it just being back with family, or what was that?
I think also like we really liked working with coffee, and when we worked at this bar in Oslo, there was nothing like it in Sweden at all. And I think we just wanted to do something similar and also show or like bring that kind of coffee to Sweden, Helsingborg, where we were from.
It's hard to explain. It's been different. Maybe it was an earlier movement or scene in the States, but over here it was like nothing back then. Very, very few players in Europe. It was hard to move on to work. For example, if we would have wanted to work in a similar business somewhere else, that would have been quite difficult because there wasn't many businesses up and running back then.
What kind of businesses would you say dominated the market for where you're from in Helsingborg?
I would say like the coffee scene in Sweden has been, or back then at least, still is to a large extent. It was either kind of traditional, really dark roasted filter coffee that people drink gallons and gallons of. I think we're behind Finland in consuming the most coffee in the world.
I was going to say, the Nordic countries are pretty known for coffee consumption.
Yeah, but it's not, I mean, it's low quality. It's dark. It's very bitter. People take it with milk a lot of the time, milk and sugar. So that was kind of one part of it. Then for coffee bars, the ones that kind of, had espresso machines, which was kind of not as common back then. God, we sound really old. Which we are, I guess. But sorry.
No, that's fine. I know that feeling. You get use the words back then and in those days.
Yeah. No, but like the espresso bars or whatever you would call it, coffee bars. It was only Italian blends. It was like Robusta. The place we were with was two blends. One was 80% Robusta and one was like 60.
But also 15 years, right? 15 years is like in coffee would be like 100 years in many other fields, I guess. Yeah. I mean, it's changed a lot. Definitely.
Yeah.
It feels like in no small part because people like you put a stake in the ground for specialty coffee and made the decision to open a place that kind of got people used to something different. I wonder if you would describe to me what it was like to take over that restaurant from being coffee professionals that worked for businesses to now taking over a business. I mean, what was that like when you just got the keys? Keys to the shop and started from there?
I mean, we were young, I would say. I think I was 27. Yeah.
25 and 26.
Back then. But when I look back, I feel like we were young, naive, and very unexperienced when it came to running a business. Also, I would say that was like what made it a little bit problematic in some ways, but it was also kind of key in being able to do it. Because I think if we were not young, naive, and I don't know about unexperienced, but at least I think you need to be naive at least to jump into something like this. And I think if you're not young, I don't know if you would have the energy to do it. So I think that was good in the end.
But I mean, I agree. I think the space was beautiful, and it was hard to kind of turn down the offer. What we said actually from the start was that the worst thing that can happen is that it won't work out, and then we will have to take it from there. It's not necessarily something wrong with us. It might just be that, people don't understand what we're doing, or they don't share the same taste, but that would be okay. So we were kind of okay with potentially failing, but we wanted to do it our way, do what we believed in.
So did you start roasting before you even got into the restaurant, or did it all happen at the same time?
Well, I started learning roasting a little bit. I wouldn't say learning the ideas at least when we lived in Oslo. I did a lot of sample roasting back then, but also I joined as much as I could at the roastery, and was very hungry to learn as much as possible. But to be fair, when I look back at it now, of course I didn't know anything at all almost. But what was good was no one else knew anything either. So that was all good.
When you're going to open this coffee bar and you had this roasting experience, did you just have to buy a roaster and install it in the restaurant and start roasting to provide yourselves coffee as soon as you opened your retail space? How did that work?
The shop was already, the ventilation system was well built because it was kind of made for a really great restaurant. So we could just kind of connect the roaster straight on there. And I guess we told the fire department that it was similar to pizza oven. And they were just okay, that's fine. Because this is it's in the middle of the city, in an old building was built 1812. Maybe, in some cities there would be regulations if you could have a coffee roaster in a building like that. But, and then we had a friend of ours in Oslo that was studying to become an architect. So he helped us with all the drawings of the space. It was kind of, took us a few months to make it ready, but we opened up in the fall of 2007.
Excellent. So you're introducing somewhat of a new style of coffee to your community. What were people's responses to what you were doing?
I think a lot of people really didn't like it, to be honest. I think a lot of people thought it was
too weird,
very acidic and or sour and very strange. Because before that, the other espresso bars, like we said, was using Italian Robusta blends, right? So it was very different. And we also decided from the start that we would just do what we believed in ourselves. Only try to roast in a way where we thought the coffee tasted as good as possible, and that was pretty light compared to what most people was used to. We also thought it was as important to not only have a coffee bar where we had really good coffee, but we also wanted to create a space or a place where you didn't necessarily have to be a coffee person or a coffee geek to enjoy. I mean, if you just wanted to come in and have a tea or, something else, you would still think it was a great place, hopefully. So I think a lot of people still really, even though they didn't understand what we tried to do with the coffee, they hopefully thought it was a nice place to visit.
I think throughout the years, we've always, I guess from day one almost, we've had a lot of coffee tourists visiting us. People would come from all over the world, normally fly into Copenhagen and spend some time there, and then they would maybe take a day and come up and visit us. It takes just over an hour one way to go to Helsingborg from Copenhagen. And I think, a lot of people just kind of saw these strangers coming in, and they overheard them saying hey, we're from Japan, or we're from Canada. Probably made them understand a little bit faster what we were up to.
Yeah, it seems so. I mean, something interesting that, we haven't been exposed to is happening here. So it feels like they would have, it must have given them a little bit of a sense of, well, maybe we should just give them the benefit of the doubt, or I should be a little bit more open to this than I am. So as you said earlier, all of these dark roast drinkers putting cream in their coffee, I can imagine a lot of people just reflexively putting cream in their lighter roasted coffee and having
I mean,
very interesting experience.
That's something that we did from the start. We were like focusing a lot on filter coffee. I mean, that's what most people drink in Sweden. We convince everyone to at least try the coffee before they would put anything in it. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have like milk or cream sitting on the counter, for example. So people would have to ask for it. And then we always said a few words about the coffee, where it was from. We changed the coffee daily. I mean, obviously we didn't have new coffee for each day, but we kind of rotated between the coffees we carried. And that also made people aware of like, wow, the coffee today tastes really different from the one you had yesterday. And I like this more, or, you know, I don't like it as much. After a while, we could really tell that people were actually experiencing the flavor profiles and the different coffees more than they perhaps knew from the start.
When do you think it turned from your reputation being spread or championed by tourists that were coming in to your reputation being spread and championed by locals who have been won over?
I think we've had best customers, regulars in the world. We've had like super nice, super sweet guests. Many of the ones that are still visiting us to buy coffee at the roastery, etc., they've been there from the start. So it's not, maybe we, you know, I think it's going to be that way with any business. You will, when it's new, you will have lots of people visiting, and some of them you will love what you do, and some will be like, I don't like the vibe, I don't like the music, I don't like the coffee, whatever. And that's fine.
When you're talking about staying true to what you do and how some people vibe with it and other people don't, and that's fine, a lot of operators, it takes a long time for them personally to get to the point where they can say, that's fine. Because a lot of people just start their coffee bars and they want to please everybody right away. Do you think that it was your exposure to the greater industry that allowed you to get to that point a little bit quicker, to kind of know exactly what you wanted to do and be okay with people not liking it?
I wouldn't say so necessarily, and perhaps it sounded a little bit arrogant, or when I said that before. But what I mean is, like, we wanted to do something that we believed in, and not everyone will understand or kind of agree with our beliefs. But I think as soon as you start to kind of try to please everyone, that's when you kind of lose yourself, or it's risk of losing yourself. Because I found in the beginning, when we were running at the shop, people had so many ideas of what we should serve, how we could change things, everything from, opening hours to interior design and so on. And, if we would have listened to all of it, it would have been just chaos. And of course, we are the ones finding out what's working and what's not. And I think it's hard, at least for us, it was hard back then to have some kind of idea what people would be looking for. And since our concept was so different from anything that was around at the time, it was,
it's almost like you're telling them what to look for.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of had to lead the way and try to do it as good as we could.
And so that retail expression of Koppi was just a famous destination for coffee tourists. It changed the landscape of what people would expect from coffee for Sweden, and especially where you're from. And you operated that for 10 years or so. And I think pretty much it was 2017 that you shut down the retail store and focused on roasting. What went into that decision? Why make a choice to close something that, from another perspective, was a great flag waving for your roasting? Just talk us through exactly what went into that.
Well, it was a few things that kind of made us come to the decision to close the cafe. I would say that one of the major reasons was that I guess it was a year and a half or so before we closed, we moved the roaster to a new location. So we had the roaster in the shop from day one. And it was like sitting behind the bar, behind a glass wall. And so you could see it. It was like the first thing you would see when you walked in. Well, basically we ran out of space way before we actually moved the roastery, but we moved to this great big industrial site, and Charles had to be there pretty much all the time because he's been in charge of the roasting since day one. I'm not roasting myself. When we moved the roaster from the shop, it quite instantly, I would say, it started feeling strange. It started feeling like it just changed the whole kind of atmosphere in the shop, at least for us. I don't know. It had just been there and had been such a vital part of what Koppi is. Everything from the sound a roaster makes to there was always things happening up in the roastery. Someone packing coffee or Charles roasting, and I don't know. It kind of gave the shop its own life in a strange way. It didn't really matter if it was completely packed or if it was almost empty. It was always something kind of happening up in the roastery.
I think also the shop and Koppi was built very much around the two of us. And like Anne said, when we moved the roaster, I had to be at the new place quite all the time, more or less. And you were also getting more and more into like traveling and outsourcing coffee and doing that kind of job, like that kind of side of the business. So I think when we were not there, I think so much it also changed the vibe a little bit, or the atmosphere, like you said, Anne. So for me, I didn't feel like I had the same attachment or the same feelings for the shop once we were not there so much, and also when the roasting part was removed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like it really solidified for you that what you were most passionate about was the roasting.
Yeah.
And that you could, a lot of people do what you did, right? They move the roaster to a bigger location, but then they just delegate and outsource and hire, and but it sounds like immediately you figured like that's not what we wanted to do when we opened.
Yeah, I mean, since we've been kind of doing everything ourselves since day one. We've been very involved in running the shop, even towards the end. It was, I mean, it's also a little bit complicated to be in a smaller town. It's harder to find staff that are, I mean, we've been forced to kind of train our staff from scratch. Most people had no experience in coffee, which has been completely fine. I think that's actually perhaps been a positive thing in many ways, but it's also been a very time-consuming part of the business to train someone and try to teach them as much as we can about what we do. And then, at the same time, we were working more and more, and kind of, I was out traveling, visiting customers, sourcing, found it really hard to be as good as we wanted to be when it came to running our shop.
Yeah, that's actually a very important thing. I think I felt at least like the bar was not always as good as I wanted it to be, when we're not there. But at the same time, we couldn't be there all the time. So
I guess we like to micromanage.
yeah.
Well, which works really well with roasting, doesn't it? I mean, and with retail, it's almost, you don't just let go, but it's the delegation. It's a whole nother animal. And so having that roasting element be you're focused on that just naturally more and more and feeling the pull. It's admirable that you took a 10-year-old retail business and made that decision. Because a lot of people would say, well, we've spent 10 years doing this. There's no way that we can switch. So it's kind of it feels like a pretty brave move to make.
I think so. But it was also, I was going through a personal crisis, you can say. And my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer a few years before we closed. And every time we got like a negative news that her current treatment didn't work, I was just getting more and more stressed by the idea that I wouldn't be able to spend time with her and support my family. Yeah, it just made me really think what's important in life. I think that was I'm very happy that we came to the decision. One of the reasons that I didn't feel like I had the will or energy to keep doing it. And then she passed away 10 months after we closed, and I got to spend as much time as I wanted, which was invaluable to me.
Man, I'm sorry to hear that. And it's also great to hear that decision was made and that you got to spend that time. And it seems like in the past few years that decision, it sounds like it's something that you've stood behind and have seen fruit from in your roasting and the kind of margins that it's made for your life, because you could have just really gotten exponentially more busy had you hung on to that. Some people want to be that busy, I guess, but has this decision continued to be a good one for your family and for your life and your business?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. It's actually been the best decision ever. As soon as we closed the shop, we were able to focus much more on the roastery. We were able to pay much more attention to our customers. Wholesale customers and retail for that matter. So we ended up growing pretty fast as soon as I think the first year we probably increased the volumes with 25%, wow. The first year after closing. And then we had lost kind of our own bar as a big customer as well. So I think it's been positive. It's just given us an opportunity to focus.
How did it increase your business specifically? Like, was it that you simply had more time to go hunt down more wholesale clients and spend time in sales and acquisition of new clients? Like, what do you think was the biggest difference?
That's actually, that's something we actually never did. I think we're never been very good at sales, or we haven't been doing it at all, actually. I mean, I think all of the clients we have contacted us and said that they wanted to get our coffee. So that's been kind of lucky for us. But I think just the fact that, we've been a little bit better at having time to answering emails and, following up on things and maybe just visiting clients and do that kind of things because we had time all of a sudden.
More kind of as well, I would say we started paying more attention on kind of on developing our brand and branding, and we've spent more energy on marketing, kind of different social media platforms, etc. Closing the shop just released so much time for us, basically, because as any business owner knows, if you have a retail location, you have to You have to open at specific hours. You have to close at specific hours. And we were allowed to kind of be more flexible when we were just doing the roasting, because it didn't really matter if we came to the roastery 7:30 or 8:15, as long as we did what we had to. We could work as long as we wanted in the evening. It's been a good transition, I would say.
Well, it's really great to hear, and it's a unique example, because we have a sort of default mode of scaling in the direction of retail locations and things like that, and not a mode of scaling by subtraction, if you will, which obviously worked for you. And I'm guessing it probably would work for others who are, where it's appropriate, of course. But in terms of your roasting, obviously putting more attention on you've always paid a lot of attention to sourcing and to the process and fine-tuning your operations and things like that. Over the course of the years since 2007, obviously your roasting style and abilities have improved. What would you say is the biggest difference today than back then? I mean, describing how you approach sourcing and sustainability and quality.
Pretty much from day one, I've been the one in charge of the sourcing, mainly because Charles has been taking care of production. So I've been the one traveling. And I mean, already before we started our business, we knew that we wanted to visit producers, establish relationship with producers, because it's the only thing that makes sense for us, I would say. And being a small company, it's of course a slightly more difficult process to source yourself, because maybe you don't have the volumes to fill up containers, etc. But I think in Costa Rica, we've been working with the same families since 2010, I think. We go there every year. We followed them on their path and how they've changed and how they've grown, etc. And it's been, really, really, really fun. And it gives me a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning. Costa Rica was the first country where we did this. And then I started traveling to Colombia in 2013. After a couple of years there, I also got introduced to some fantastic producers that we've been working with since. And then we rely on importers for our African coffees. We've been working with Nordic Approach since they started a few years ago, and we've been really happy with the coffees they source. And I've also been traveling with them pretty much every year, because for me it's not how the coffee comes from origin to our roastery. That's not what's interesting to me. Visiting the washing stations, visiting producers, kind of get an understanding of how the coffee production is different between different countries. I think that's really important to know. Yeah, would you agree, Charles?
I agree. For the volumes that we do, I think still Africa can be a little bit difficult. We've been also working directly in Kenya, for instance, but also it's been challenging because sometimes it's been problems. And one time I don't know if you remember when the coffee had humidity was too high, and we ended up having to take it, and it was just very problematic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
No one was
in Central America and in South America, it's easier. Both in Colombia, Costa Rica, and Brazil, it's pretty straightforward and easy compared to, but Ethiopia and Kenya it's a little bit trickier.
So in sourcing the coffees, you've from the beginning of this answer to the question here, you were talking about how things have changed over the years, and the producers are a little bit more skilled in what they're producing, and obviously importers, there's a lot more of them. Nordic Approach wasn't around when you were first starting, and half of the people that we use today weren't actually. So, over the years as a roaster, what have you seen has been a major uptick in terms of why is it that the production quality of coffee has improved? Is it that relationship between the links in the value chain, like the people that are brewing the coffee and talking to the people that are growing the coffee? What do you attribute that to?
I would say, my experience from traveling is that nowadays, and since a few years back, in many countries, the producers are actually trying their own coffee. Far from everyone, but at least there's, in the small kind of villages at the collection points, there's normally a lab, and the producers that have that kind of extra interest in their own coffee, they're given an opportunity to try it, and kind of many times try it together with roasters that come over, cup together, so they get an understanding of what people are looking for, I would say. So that's, of course, a big difference. And then also the importers the industry has just changed so much since we started. It's much easier to find good coffee now, I would say.
That's good. Makes it hard to compete in a sense, because now the level is just, if everybody has access to this really wonderful coffee. I guess it's not harder because everyone still had access to the same quality coffee back then too. It's just, it tastes better now, but it's really good for coffee to have that level up in terms of the raw product. And I imagine, just especially with, what you do in where you are in the world of coffee, it's easier for people to grasp what you're doing these days because of so many more coffee bars and roasteries opening up and helping people see that this is a worthwhile thing. Have you seen that just it's a lot easier to talk to people about coffee today?
I think so. I think over here, at least, people are more interested in general in food and, wine and olive oil and coffee. And they're just like, the world of gastronomy has kind of opened up a larger audience, I would say. I also think we haven't really touched the subject too much, but I think the social media, like Instagram, that's mainly the platform we use to communicate. But that's allowed us to, reach out to both customers, but also to communicate with producers in a really fun and simple way. Instead of maybe emailing or sending a text, it's like you can actually send a video from the roastery to one of the guys that we work with, and they send videos from when they're processing our coffee. And it's allowed us to communicate around coffee in a different way and showcase it in a different way, which is helpful as well, because people that don't get the opportunity to travel to places like Colombia or Guatemala or wherever it might be, they can still see what we get to see and hopefully experience it. It's of course a different kind of experience, but I think that's been really helpful.
As we look to the future, to sound pretty heavy right there, but in the future of coffee, people are wanting to build resiliency into their businesses, of course, because of COVID and because, a lot of people have had that moment in 2020 where they're thinking, well, what's really important to me? Similar to how you were thinking along those lines in 2017. I guess the last question to you would be, what would you say the most impactful thing is that people can do, that operators can do to thrive in their businesses and, to help shape the market, to a more sustainable end, so we're all thriving?
to me, the only thing that makes sense if we want a future of coffee is to pay more attention to the producers and pay better prices for coffee. Because, what I've seen during my time traveling so much is the new, like, young generations, the children of the producing families. I mean, they are not really given many times an incentive to continue in their parents' footsteps and continue in coffee production, because it's just been so hard work. It hasn't been a future in it, mainly because prices have been too low. And that's our responsibility as roasters to make sure that they will have an incentive to keep working with coffee. Try to stay loyal and work with the same families, I think. And I think even if you don't, like, if you're a new business and maybe you haven't yet established any relationships, or maybe you can't do it or you don't want to do it, I think at least you can ask from importers, ask for transparency, ask how much you're paying, etc., and like what the cost of production is for the producers. I mean, I've touched on the subject a couple of times, and maybe we don't have time for it now, but I think many of the coffee competitions have been a little bit problematic in the sense that they highlight very extreme coffees are sold at very high prices. But normally those are coffees produced in tiny volumes, and it doesn't really represent what the coffee production is like. So my hope is that people will pay higher prices for good coffees, and that there won't be too much focus on the extreme coffees.
You can easily see how competitions and high profile coffees from, very narrowly focused media articles, etc., could catch the eye of a lot of roasters. And if they're thinking, I am a quality roaster, I should have quality coffee, the first thing they're going to think of is some of these more narrowly defined coffees, and leave out some of the coffees that could actually do more to help the producers continue to make good coffees than just buying the nano lot high 1% of the best stuff.
And I think it also would be important that it would be nice if more people would start drinking good coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Like these extreme coffees are, sometimes it's like 1 kilo or whatever. It's not something that normal people or a lot of people can drink.
It's not accessible.
It's not accessible. Our challenge is, and I would say in many ways, to make more people drink good coffee. You know what I mean?
That's exactly it. Yeah, that makes sense. Fewer people drink expensive coffee.
Exactly.
Well, Anne, Charles, this has really been fun to talk to you and learn about your story and your hearts for business and coffee. I think we've learned quite a bit, and I appreciate you being on the show. How can people stay in touch with you all and find out more about Koppi?
Well, you find us on Instagram, both our business account. So it's Koppi_roasters. And then I'm Koppi Ann, and Charles is Charlie Geo. Charles is mainly focusing on hi-fi and music on his Instagram, though, which is also a lot of fun.
It goes well with coffee.
Yeah, good combo.
Yeah, and of course, people are always welcome to reach out over email as well. Everything you might need, you can find on our website.
Thank you so much to both of you. Then again, great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that, and that it really gave you a picture into what's possible for your business. that maybe you don't need to expand as much as you thought you did. Maybe there's a different way to go about being happy and satisfied as a coffee professional in this business. And it's so difficult to manage that, because when we look around us at social media and we compare ourselves to other companies, we're constantly setting goals for ourselves that might actually be to the detriment of ourselves. And it's so cool to hear Anne and Charles's story and to hear them talk about the success that decision has brought to them, both professionally and personally. So I'm really thankful to have gotten a chance to hear their story. Such a huge amount of respect for what they do. So a big thank you to Anne and Charles for joining us on the show. We really appreciate the example that you've given us. So if you want to find out more information about what they do at Koppi and experience the magic of their coffee for yourself, you can go to their website, koppi.se. That's koppi.se. And I would recommend you follow them on Instagram over at Koppi_roasters. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about this episode or any other episode of Keys to the Shop, reach out to me via email, chris@keystotheshop.com. I always love to hear any feedback that you have, any comments, and that's also the email you can use to reach out to inquire about Keys to the Shop consulting. That's chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for joining me on this Founder Friday. I hope you have an amazing week. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.